Now, before I begin my part of the lecture, I wanted to take a moment just to kind of salute our fathers. Alhamdulillah, we all take this day where our spiritual father was born, we take it as a Father's Day. And allow me to say this on behalf of the entire community, that we do appreciate the efforts of our fathers. We say here in the West, despite whatever the West says, being a father in the Islamic sense is a real jihad. It is so important. And we appreciate, we respect, we revere our fathers. When you do it the Islamic way, that means you take Amirul Mu'mineen to be your role model. That means that you are the embodiment of two important traits. From one side, love, mercy, kindness. On the other side, strength, determination, and sacrifice. So yes, it's very important when our little girls see that they're special, that their dad loves them, when our wives are honored, when our children see that we will kiss our mother's hands, this ensures that those small little girls grow up knowing they're special because Allah created them to be women. When we play games with our boys, when we take them aside, when we teach them the ropes, that's ensuring that the next generation will grow up to be men's men. So, in addition to that, I also want to offer some encouragement for our young brothers, our young soldiers, inshallah, to also one day, inshallah soon, also become fathers and husbands, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajal farajah. Now, alhamdulillah, it's a wonderful occasion. We were blessed with wonderful poetry. Before that, the beautiful ayat of the Quran, where we're now making it not a filler. It's not something that we do before the speech starts, but we're actually listening to the verses. The verses are selected, and then we're looking at the translation, if we're not familiar with the Arabic language, to get benefit from the Quran. After this, instead of us having the Q&A portion, allow me to call an audible, inshallah, we want to do this. We want to have both a video that we've prepared for our youth to see. So we're going to talk about some of the fada'il of the Ahlul Bayt, but we want our small children, inshallah, to be able to see and then hear these fada'il narrated by one of our youth. So that's one. And then also, inshallah, afterwards, we're going to have a mawlid recited by one of our brothers. So we're hoping that everybody stays for that. So no Q&A. But inshallah, afterwards we'll go down and we'll break bread together, inshallah. But salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So, like it or not, my speech is the serious part of the program. We actually have a very serious matter to discuss, a very challenging matter. A very serious matter to discuss. We're going over, by the grace of God, a Quranic masterpiece. But it's important for us to realize what we're doing here. There are certain verses of the Quran that the Urafa would recite for their students. I'm going to mention this verse of the Quran, but the point is very important. Sometimes somebody will be making a lot of effort. They will be spinning their wheels. They'll be thinking they're doing everything correct, only to find out that they've wasted their time and they haven't been as effective as they should have been for the cause of Allah. So this is a verse of Quran. Brothers and sisters, if you can follow with me, this is surah number 18. So if everybody can turn to surah number 18, Surah Kahf, it should be Surah Kahf, and then verse number 103. 103. Let's see, brothers or sisters, I see, brothers, we're quick. Any sisters have it? 103. 103 and 104. Please let me know if you have the, yes, okay. So if brothers and sisters, the verse is simple, let's read it together, but then let's look for the message and then why the reminder, why the serious part of the program. The verse says this, قُلْ. So God is instructing the prophet, say, قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا. Shall we not inform you with those who are the greatest losers when it comes to effort? There are some people who are making all kinds of effort, spinning their wheels, trying. But God says this about them. Who are these people who God is saying to the prophet, we should inform you about those who are the biggest losers when it comes to effort? God says this in the next verse. الَّذِينَ, those who ظَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا. Their effort, that Herculean effort that they're making, is lost in the life of this world. They're making effort, but it's lost. وَهُمْ, and this is the sad part, the kicker. وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. They think they're doing such a great job. I'm spending time, I'm making effort. I think I'm doing a great job. What happened? What went wrong? Brothers and sisters, we reminded ourselves from the beginning about the importance of developing a Quranic aqidah, a Quranic worldview, so that we, like the Quran, we view God, Deen, Islam, fundamental concepts the way it was introduced to us in the Quran. What happens if I don't do this? Maybe I'll be spinning my wheels, and then in the end, I won't get that reward that I'm expecting. I'm actually a deterrent to the Imam arriving because I haven't troubled myself with relearning Islam. So, brothers and sisters, there's a very beautiful hadith from the sixth Imam when he says this. As again, you and I, alhamdulillah, we have the grace of God to commemorate the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib. How many shuhada have given their lives for us to be able to do this? How many great ulama, how many mu'mineen, how much struggle, how much resistance for you and I to be able to sit here and gather and literally without fear to be able to talk about the wilayah of Ali. The Imam tells us this about the wilayah of Ali. Imam Sadiq now speaking. He says, walayati li Ali ibn Abi Talib. So the wilayah that I, Imam Sadiq, have of Ali ibn Abi Talib, ahabbu ilayya, is more beloved to me, Imam Sadiq, min wiladati min. I am happier, I am more grateful, I feel more blessed by the wilayah of Ali than I do being the biological son of Ali. It is so important to get it right. What is wilayah? Am I a wali? Am I muwali? Am I helping? So the reason for doing this is to go over a book like this, because the Prophet has told us, he says, Aliyun mal Quran, that Ali is with the Quran, wal Quran ma Ali. And the Quran is also with Ali. That means we need to know the Quran, to get to know. And that's why going over a subject-wise tafsir like this is so important for all of us. So what happens is we're going to be redefining certain Quranic terms. These terms are used a lot in the Quran, but if the understanding is wrong, we might end up not benefiting. Allow me to tell you a story. It's a good night. Let me tell you a story that inshallah is not true. They said once this man was driving in his neighborhood, and there was an intersection, and he knew that this intersection had a camera. If you did any sort of misbehavior, the camera would flash. So naturally, knowing that there's a traffic light, the man would drive extra slow to make sure that the camera wouldn't flash. So he was driving, and the camera flashed. But he was sure that he hadn't gone against the speed limit, so he turned around and he went back again. And he drove even slower, and he drove, and again the camera flashed. He said, no, this is broken. Now he was going to have a good time. He drove through it 3 more times, and each time the camera kept flashing. After a week, he got a letter in the mail. It was a ticket, 5 tickets, for driving without a seatbelt. What are the details? What are we going to redefine? What do we need to know about Islam, Quran? We're going to try and answer 4 questions. So if you brothers and sisters remember, the last time we spoke, we talked about 5 must-have traits for the mu'min. 5 must-have traits. If we don't have these traits, but really between us and Allah, baynana wa bayn Allah, we're making real effort to acquire these traits, then yes, we can also be called mu'mineen. One of them that we talked about last time was a healthy fear of God. We talked about that last time. Having a healthy fear of God. But the other ones that we want to answer today are the following 4 questions. Number 1, what should our relationship with the Quran be like? What should my relationship with the Quran be like? Number 2, what does tawakkul do? What role does tawakkul, or trusting in Allah, relying on Allah, what role does that play in the life of the mu'min? Number 3, what are 3 acceptable takeaways when talking about that all-important concept that we've all heard, iqamatus salah, establishing the prayer? When that's an order for all of us, what does that mean? What are 2 acceptable takeaways? And then finally, last but not least, keeping that ayat that I mentioned in the beginning in mind, there are some people who spend, who try, who make effort, and in the end it's all in vain. The last one is Quranic infaq. What does that mean? What does it mean to spend in the way of God? So, because we're relearning Islam, and it's difficult to unlearn something that we never learned before, we came to a belief about a certain thing, about Islam. We all love Islam, but we might not have been introduced to Islam through the Quran, through the verses of the Quran, through pondering the Quran. So because of that, we ask God for help. As always, we're going to start with that beautiful hadith, that beautiful dua of Imam Sadiq. He starts off with, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The Imam says this, wa arinil haqqa haqqan hatta atabi'ahu. O God, show me the truth to be truth, so that I embrace it, so that I accept it, so that I follow it. What else? وَأَرِنِ الْبَاطِلَ بَاطِلًا. Show me, O God, falsehood to be falsehood, batil to be batil, hatta ajtanibahu, so that I can avoid it. So we're asking Allah for guidance. Our hearts are ready to be retaught Islam as we should. So back to our ayat of the Quran. So brothers and sisters, now if we can turn to surah number 8, Surah Anfal, surah number 8. We're going to be looking at verses number 2 and 3. We're not going to go over, meaning we're going to be looking at a lot of ayat of the Quran, but the focus tonight will be on Surah Anfal. Okay. So the verse started off in this way. So brothers and sisters, everybody have that? Surah Anfal, verse number 2. Brothers, any sisters? Yes. All right. So it should be this. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Innamal mu'minun. So this is God speaking. Only these are mu'mineen. Only these are believers. Innamal mu'minun. Only they are believers. What are they like? Alladhina. Those who, إِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ, when Allah is mentioned, وَجِلَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ, their hearts tremble in awe of God. They fear God. When God is mentioned, khawf, right? Wajilat means khafat. Wajilat means there's hope, there's literal khawf. I do fear God. I've recognized His majesty, His glory. I have that healthy fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now to our questions, so today's questions. And we'll start and we'll go through them, inshallah. The first question is, the second must-have trait for the mu'min. What should my relationship with the Quran be like? I'm a mu'min. I want to serve the cause. I'm here to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of the time. What should my relationship with the Quran be like? Back to our verse, brothers and sisters. So the verse is this: وَإِذَا تُلِيَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُهُ. When the ayat of Allah, when the signs of Allah, when the verses of the Quran are recited for these mu'mineen, زَادَتْهُمْ إِيمَانًا. It increases their faith. A true mu'min or mu'mina, when the ayat of the Quran are recited, so this is whether I'm listening to somebody else reciting the Quran, or I myself am reciting the Quran, it increases me in faith. There's a catch though. When is it that when the ayat of the Quran are recited, or I am reciting them, that increases me in faith? This one is we're going to go for another ayat of Quran. So what we're talking about is one of the miraculous effects of the Quran. It helps me increase in iman. One of the miraculous effects. When is it that reciting the Quran helps me to increase in faith? Is it everybody who recites the Quran? This is another verse of the Quran. So, brothers and sisters, let's see if you can find this. Surah number 38 and 29. Let's see if I got this verse right. Let's see, first of all, if anybody can find it. Remember that we're looking for a question, though, from this ayat of Quran. Anybody found it? Brothers? Sisters, anybody? Surah 38 and verse number 29. Okay. So, brothers and sisters, let's see if you can follow along with me in the Arabic. We're looking for an answer. What are we looking for? When is it that reciting the Quran deepens my faith? Is it everybody who recites the Quran? Is it automatic? I just sit back and my faith is increased? Or is it something that I do? And if I do this, then that happens. Whether I'm listening to somebody else or whether I myself am reciting. So, brothers and sisters, let's see if we can follow along with the ayat of the Quran. God says this about His book. Kitabun. So the Quran is a book. Anzalnahu ilayka mubarak. We sent it down to you. We revealed it to you, mubarak. So it's a blessed book that we, God, have sent down to you. What was the goal of Quran? When is it that believers' faith is increased? Let's look at the Arabic of this, brothers and sisters. What was the goal? God says in the Quran. Same verse. لِيَدَّبَّرُوا آيَاتِهِ. In order that they, plural, not Rasulullah, they, you and I, mu'mineen and mu'minat, plural, we, yadabbaru ayatih, they ponder its verses. So when you and I go to the Quran looking for answers, trying to understand, why is it that it's so important to read the translation of Quran? I'm looking for answers. I'm looking for guidance. Direction. What am I supposed to do? What does God want from me? When I read the Quran looking for guidance, then the Quran, it grows my faith. My faith becomes deeper. Now I want to mention a few points about this particular thing. There's a couple of things that we need to keep in mind. We learn from our senior ulama that the relationship of the Quran in our heart. What's the relationship like between the Quran and our heart? The Quran, brothers and sisters, is spiritual water for the soul and the heart. It's spiritual water. The Quran needs to be recited daily. It's not enough, just like we couldn't say, well, I had some water yesterday, I had water 3 days ago. How are you feeling? Water is something we need every day. The Quran, reciting the Quran, is something that we need on a daily basis. How many of us have parched souls? That I'm not giving the soul what it needs. It needs Quran. It needs to be read with intention, with niyyah, trying to understand. The soul needs this. So that's one. It needs to be every day. Number two, the effect of the Quran on your souls, brothers and sisters, and this is as a reminder to myself first, before any of you. The effect of the soul, of the Quran on your soul and your heart is gradual. So if there's somebody who's like, okay, well, I heard that ayat of Quran. I'm going to read Quran and now I want my toes to start tingling. No, it's going to be gradual. The miraculous effect of the Quran on your soul and heart to grow your faith is gradual. So it's daily, but it's gradual. This is actually a secret of the resistance. The leader says, I tested people. There were some people who were involved in the resistance, but these individuals would always have a small copy of the Quran with them. Now we have Qurans in our phones. There's some people, the leader says, I would notice these guys. Whenever they would get a chance, they would spend a little bit of time reading the Quran, looking in God's books, looking for answers, looking for guidance. He says there was a big difference in the resistance between those guys and the people who weren't friends with the Quran. With them, I found greater insight. Basira. Later we're going to talk about that. Basira, brothers and sisters, insight comes from above. It comes from Allah. Basira. Greater determination. More attached to the cause. Those mu'mineen and mu'minat who were friends with the Quran, reading the Quran, looking for guidance from the Quran, these individuals were very different to those who didn't develop that relationship of friendship with the Quran. Number three, ideally, brothers and sisters, you want to start your friendship with the Quran from the time that you're young. Now, for you and I, that doesn't mean as fathers, as mothers, well, I'm going to force my kids. You're going to sit down and you'll read Quran if it kills you. No. I have to create the grounds that my children love the Quran. They need to see me reciting Quran, interacting with Quran, attached to Quran. When they see that, when they see, and this is not something I'm faking that I'm reading, and they see a tear roll down my cheek, or they see me kiss the Quran gently, that's when they learn that the Quran is holy. But this is something I watched, I learned. When I see it revolutionize your life and change your life. So it's something, ideally though, this friendship, we want to start it while we're young. So for us, our job is to pray to create those grounds, but for a youngster, what happens if I begin my friendship and my relationship with the Quran while I'm still young? What's the difference between waiting for a long time? I'll wait till I'm old and gray, and then when I've got nothing better to do, I'll read Quran then. What happens if I embrace the Quran from early? Hadith now. This is from the 6th Imam. The Imam says this, Man qara al-Quran. So whoever recites the Quran, again, they're looking for guidance, direction. Man qara al-Quran, wa huwa shabun mu'min. But this is a believing youth, a young person. What happens to a young person who reads the Quran? Hadith. اختلط القرآن بلحمه ودمه. The Quran becomes attached and connected with the person's flesh and blood. Your heart is ready to embrace Quranic realities and to see the Quran, the world through the lens of the Quran more when you're younger. more when you haven't committed sins, you haven't gotten so attached. That readiness is there. This is a secret now from the Ahlul Bayt. Last question about the Quran. How much Quran should we recite daily? Is there a certain amount that we should be saying, you know what, I'll push myself, I'll make myself. I wasn't as much a friend of the Quran as I should be. How much should I be reading the Quran? Here, brothers and sisters, this is now from the Urafa. Brothers and sisters, quality is more important than quantity. Maybe for me, I open the Quran, I read one verse. I read 2, I read 5. But I read it and I enjoy it. Even to the extent the spiritual teachers, those Urafa, giving advice now. Let's say somebody had a habit for themselves. For instance, just as an example, the Prophet tells us that let's say somebody recites 10 verses of the Quran daily. Right? Hadith. Man qara ashra ayat. This person, my habit, 10 verses of the Quran daily. Fi laylatin. Every night I do this. Lam yuktab min al-ghafilin. This person won't be written down as one of the heedless. Let's say that was my goal, 10 verses, because it increases. There's different effects, obviously, reading more Quran is better. But let's say I was a 10-verse person. Urafa now. If I'm starting to feel pressure, so I'm trying to get through, but it's just, I got to get my 10 in, I'm gritting my teeth, I'm not enjoying it. At this stage, less, but enjoying. Friendship with the Quran. Now verse of Quran. So let's see, brothers and sisters. Sisters, you guys look for this verse before the brothers, inshallah. 73, Surah 73, and it's the last verse. Verse number 20. Surah 73 and verse number 20. It's going to be part of the verse. This is only part of the verse. It's answering that question. How much of the Quran should I be reciting? What about if I'm not feeling that thirsty right now? Yes, I need to read it daily. But for me, let's say I was reading more than that, and I would read it regularly. But today I don't feel like it as much. What does Allah say? Advice from the Urafa. What do they tell us? So this one, let's see if you can find this part of the verse. God says in the Quran, let's see who can find this. Faqra'u, so you plural, recite. Faqra'u ma tayassara min al-Quran. Recite the amount of Quran that is easy. You found it, brother? Alhamdulillah. Any of the sisters, you found it? Okay. So let's say, like ideally, obviously more. Maybe I have a routine for myself. Maybe I recite several pages a day. If I find that I can't, tonight is not one of those days, right? Still some is better than none. Next question. What does tawakkul do for the mu'min? So tawakkul, brothers and sisters, is reliance on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is another one of those areas where there's a big misconception and something we have to push back against. There were people in the past who, when they would hear of a concept, a powerful concept, like tawakkul, that literally turns you into a giant killer. Tawakkul, brothers and sisters, is something else. It'll literally turn you into a giant killer. Some people, when they would hear about relying on God, tawakkul, they would have a misconception. This is what we're pushing back against. What's the misconception? The misconception, brothers and sisters, is this. Instead of me feeling responsible for making it happen, instead of my effort being what's responsible for making it happen, I expect a miracle from God. Not my efforts. That's not what's going to make this happen. God will step in. There's a very important story of the Quran, but brothers and sisters, I want us to see if we can make this a little bit more practical. So let's look at a story from the Holy Quran. So brothers and sisters, this is Surah 5, Surah Ma'idah, Surah 5 and verse number 24. 5:24. Let me give you some context, but let's see first of all if we can find it. Surah 5 and verse number 24. Who's found it? All right, the sisters beat the brothers, inshallah. All right. Context. The children of Bani Israel, so the children of Israel, Bani Israel, the Muslims of that time, faced an impossible challenge. Their Nabi, their Wali, the Wali of the time, told them that the promised land was for them. But in the promised land was a terrible enemy. And these people had been second-class citizens for generations. They saw themselves as weaklings. They responded to their prophet by saying, Inna fiha qawman jabbarin. Those guys are too tough. We can't take those guys. We're little guys. The prophet insisted that this is the land you're supposed to go. Listen to what the people said, and then after that, let's see if we can find any areas in our life. So the people responded to their prophet. So surah 5, verse number 24. Let's read it together. Qalu, they said. So this was the belief of the people. Qalu, they said, Ya Musa, O Musa, inna lan nadkhulaha abadan ma damu fiha. This is the boldness of talking to a prophet of God like this. We are never going in. We told you, Musa, inna fiha qawman jabbarin. We are never going to enter it as long as they are in it. After that, what happened? This is how does somebody say this to a prophet? He said this, فَذْهَبْ أَنْتَ وَرَبُّكَ. You and your Lord, you guys go. فَذْهَبْ أَنْتَ وَرَبُّكَ فَقَاتِلَا. You two go and fight. You do jihad. You do the heavy lifting. إِنَّا هَاهُنَا قَائِدُونَ. We're sitting right here. You go over, you conquered that land, you and Allah go fight. We're right here. Whenever it happens, you let us know, we're right behind you. Okay, now somebody like myself might say, well, that's so silly. Who would tell Allah that? But now let's make it practical. Are there any areas in our, this is now each and every person, are there any areas in my life where I also say, you and Allah go fight? Instead of me saying, my job, my responsibility, yes, all tawfiq is from God, but are there any areas in my life where I say, I might not verbalize it, but I say that you and Allah go fight? I'm waiting for a miracle, not my effort. Okay? Why? Because the Prophet has given us the 3 signs of a patient person. The patient person, brothers and sisters, has 3 signs. The Prophet teaches us. The person never gets tired. They never get lazy, and their relationship with Allah doesn't become bitter. The mu'min, well, we can do this all day. This is from one of our shuhada, Shaheed Hassan Baqiri. He says this, if you sense that you're tired, you're exhausted, you can't do this anymore. He's talking about the physical jihad. He was like, there must be something that you're doing that's not ilahi. Go find that problem. Otherwise, jihad in the way of Allah never makes you tired. If I'm looking for divine goals, I've identified something as a taklif. I should never be tired, never lazy, always giving my best effort, and not bitter with God. So what happens, brothers and sisters, is for those who don't have tawakkul, those who God is not in their lives, they despair. They give up. Maybe it's in my spiritual life. I'm never going to be better spiritually. Maybe it's in my family life. Maybe it's in my marriage. Maybe it's in my health. Whatever the, right? Instead of expecting my miracle, we believe in a God of miracles. We're told by this is a hadith that the Urafa would tell to their students, expect the unexpected more than you expect the norm. Hadith. Kun lima la tarju. Expect the thing that you don't expect more than what you expect. That's the God that we serve. A supernatural God. A God for whom there is no closed door. Nothing can stop him. I just have to make my best effort. So tawakkul is that full reliance on God and that literal belief God can change anything around. Now, what happens though is because life is sometimes difficult, sometimes we have to learn to see the setbacks as God sees them. Because there is no setback for God. God always gives me what's good. But sometimes I have to learn to see things from God's perspective. I'm going to share a verse of Quran, but maybe if you don't mind, I'll share another story that inshallah is not true. A man was telling a story, and he said that my sister had a dog named Jazzy. And Jazzy, after a while, she got old, to the extent that Jazzy developed painful tumors, and my sister decided to put Jazzy down. And my son was very disappointed. He was very hurt. So he was talking to me about it, and I said, don't worry. When Jazzy's dead, Jazzy's going to go to dog heaven. He said, dog heaven? I said, yeah. In dog heaven, Jazzy will get to do her favorite things, the things that she loved. She'll be able to chase squirrels. So my 7-year-old thought about it for a little while, and he was like, dog heaven must be squirrel hell. It's a change of perspective. If the believer is doing their effort, and I serve a good God, and God is moving me in the direction, then after that, the following verse is true. So Surah 4 and verse number 19. Surah 4, Surah Nisa, and verse number 19. Part of the verse should read as I am saying. فَعَسَىٰ أَن تَكْرَهُ شَيْئًا. Many times you might dislike something. وَيَجْعَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ خَيْرًا كَثِيرًا. But Allah put a lot of good in it. So I do my job. I don't get tired. I realize, as the Quran says, and how many times does God have to say this in the Quran? The keys of the heavens and the earth are in God's hands alone. Ayat of Quran. So, brothers and sisters, see if you can turn to Surah 39, 63. This is one of the times that this is repeated in the Quran. Surah 39 and verse number 63. Who can find it? You got it? Okay, good. Let's see if I've got this right. Lahu, for him, maqalidus samawati wal ard. For him, meaning for God, are the keys of the heavens and the earth. Everything is in God's hands. It seems like things are closed, like there's no way out. But for the mu'min, they're like, well, get your popcorn ready. I'm getting ready to experience God's best. I'm living and I'm expecting and I'm hoping for His miracle. Next one that's very important. We have two that we want to cover now. One of them is, what does it mean to establish the prayer? So brothers and sisters, we're going to go back to Surah number 8, right? Surah number 8, verse number 3. Surah 8, verse number 3, those must-have traits for the mu'min. Surah 8, verse number 3. Anybody found it? Anybody? Sisters? Okay. So God is describing those must-have traits for the mu'min. The question, if you remember, was, what are acceptable understandings for iqamatus salah, establishing the prayer? Alladhina yuqimuna salah, those who establish the prayer. Those who establish the prayer. So brothers and sisters, establishing the prayer is different than praying. It's different than making somebody else pray. Establishing the prayer, there are two possible meanings. One of them is to pray the prayer properly. Some people cheat the prayer. They're not praying the prayer, looking for results, talking to God, becoming friends with Allah through prayer. People who do prayer like that the right way, they see results. Some of the achievements that have been achieved by our nuclear scientists, they would get to a stage that there was just no way out. They would go offer prayer, and then they would realize what the answer was. Literally 2 rakats of prayer. Our greats, those great ulama, what would they do when they really needed help? True prayer is incredible. So that's one of it, prayer with its recommendations. The other one is something which is a little bit challenging and politically not correct. Establishing the prayer in society means that we make the community worship God. But not just to offer prayer, to change the direction of the community to be one where it's one of submission to Allah and rejection of the tawaghit. I don't know how many of our brothers and sisters, and I hope probably none of you, but you saw that sad video about Tyree Nichols. So the video was too terrible to watch, right? This is the fruit of the tawaghit, the fruit of the taghut. There was a man arrested by 5 black officers, and they literally dragged this man out of his car. This man was 150 pounds. 5 big officers dragged this man out, electrocuted this man, beat this man. This man was running for his life, stood him up and literally beat him to death. Then after that, you go a little deeper, and you're like, well, his police chief was an African-American woman. And you look at what she did in Atlanta, and you're like, oh, this is a special case. And you look a little deeper, and you see the police trained with Israel. And she was known for what she would do in Atlanta. And then she came to Memphis. The system of the Taghut turns people like this. She's African American. She's a woman. They were black officers. What did they do to another human being? For nothing. The system of the Taghut. Is prayer just going up and down and just making salat? Or is it establishing something greater? Rejection of non-divine authority. Only God is the authority on the earth. If it's that prayer is special. I want to mention something from Imam Khomeini. Imam Khomeini was telling a story. He said that once a high-ranking British officer came into Iraq. And this high-ranking officer, part of the occupation, he heard the adhan for the first time. When he heard the adhan for the first time, he asked, he said, what is that sound? And his advisors, those around him, they said, oh, that's the Muslim call to prayer. He asked a very important question. What does establishing the prayer mean? He says, does that conflict with the interest of the United Kingdom? That adhan, that call to prayer, iqamatus salah, does it conflict with the interest of the United Kingdom? They said no. You can imagine the smirk on his face. He was like, let them call that adhan as much as they want. If my prayer isn't connecting the dots, it's not a sign of me standing up, standing for God, submitting to God, and rejecting the tawaghit, then they don't mind that prayer. They don't mind and doesn't connect the dots. Last point. Last point is very important. The last point, brothers and sisters, we're back to our verse. Surah 8, verse number 3, the last must-have trait for the mu'min. God says this, وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ, and from that which we have given them, يُنْفِقُونَ, they do infaq, they spend from that which we have given them. Brothers and sisters, this is very important. Many people spend, few do infaq. What is infaq? Infaq, brothers and sisters, is the mark of an intelligent person. Infaq is targeted spending. The intelligent person looks to see what is the need of the ummah right now. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. I'm not going to spend money just anywhere. What's the need? How can I, whatever I've been given, it might be my talents, it might be my time, it might be my youth, it might be my connections, whatever I have, it's targeted spending. How do I advance the cause? And I'm going to end here. Last point. Because remember, we started off with a verse that there's some people who do a lot of effort and they don't get the results that they want. This is the birthday of Imam Ali. But brothers and sisters, you and I, how many people, question, have passed the test of Ali in history? What person do you know, Muslim, non-Muslim, who doesn't like Ali of the past? Read about Imam Ali, very incredible, but has a problem with the line of Ali, the camp of Ali. How many people right now would kill themselves to go back in history about the door of Fatima then, the burning door of Fatima? But what about the burning door of Fatima now? If you're going to do infaq, targeted spending, am I doing it keeping in mind the line of Ali and not just spinning my wheels? But brothers and sisters, inshallah, we're going to stop with that.